Have you ever caught yourself using a phrase your parent always used, like in the exact same tone, in the exact same situation? Or, maybe you've noticed that kids who grow up around aggressive behavior somehow just end up displaying that same aggression, and the crazy part is, nobody ever sat them down and taught them how to do it. Well, actually, scratch that. It's not genetics, and it is definitely not a coincidence. It is one of the most uncomfortable yet absolutely fascinating truths in all of behavioral science.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into Albert Bandura's social learning theory, but we're going to apply it directly to where most of us spend the vast majority of our waking hours, the office. We're looking closely at how observational learning literally shapes the everyday actions of team leaders, managers, and honestly, entire workplace cultures.
All right, let's dive into this by laying out a quick roadmap. First, the science of observation. Second, leaders as behavioral models. Third, how systems actually drive behavior. And finally, redesigning the workplace system. We're bridging the gap from a famous 1960s psychology experiment all the way to modern organizational systems.
Starting off with Section 1, the science of observation, beyond rewards and punishments. Let's look back at how we originally thought human behavior worked.
So, up until the 1960s, the dominant thinking in psychology was pretty much cut and dry. In B.F. Skinner's world, we firmly believed people only acted a certain way because they were directly rewarded or punished for it. You do a good job, you get a treat. You do a bad job, you get a penalty. Pretty simple, right? Well, a psychologist named Albert Bandura suspected a massive piece of the puzzle was missing. He noticed people, especially kids, were picking up really complex behaviors without anyone ever handing them a reward or a punishment.
To test this out, Bandura ran the incredibly famous Bobo Doll experiment. Basically, he had children watch an adult interact with a large inflatable Bobo doll. Now, he tested two scenarios. In one, the adult punched it, kicked it, and just threw it around aggressively. In the other, the adult played with the doll calmly and quietly. Afterwards, the kids were left completely alone in the room with the doll. And the results? Honestly, they were striking.
Here is the crucial point. The children who watched the aggressive adult didn't just generally act out. No, they reproduced those exact punches and kicks, literally move for move with remarkable precision. And nobody told them to do it, nobody rewarded them, they simply watched and then they did. Bandura called this modeling. It turns out we build behavioral templates just by observing others, and the people we observe most closely, they become the blueprints our brains quietly use to construct our own behavior. Which brings us to Section 2. Leaders as behavioral models, and the shadows we cast. Let's see how this builds into the everyday reality of teams and managers. Just think about who your team is watching for hours every single day.
It is fascinating how perfectly Bandura's theory maps straight to the modern office. As a leader, you are the primary behavioral model. If you're in a meeting and you consistently check your phone while junior staff are presenting, you are modeling dismissive behavior. And you know what? Soon your team will stop listening to each other too. If a manager quietly cuts corners on a client report just to save time, the staff quickly learns that efficiency is valued over quality. This behavior trickles down through observation without a single official memo ever being issued.
And it's really vital to remember that modeling doesn't only happen top-down. Employees powerfully model their peers too. Imagine a highly respected senior engineer who routinely bypasses safety protocols because, well, it's faster. New hires watch that informal influencer and do the exact same thing, completely ignoring the official handbook. But on the flip side, if a popular team member shows vulnerability, admits a mistake in a meeting, and asks for help, that highly constructive behavior spreads horizontally just as fast. We are all constantly casting a shadow.
Moving to Section 3, how systems drive behavior, which is the real plot twist here. Because here's where we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, especially for all you organizational development folks out there.
Listen, if a manager is aggressive, dismissive, or hyper-anxious, it is rarely because they just woke up and chose to be toxic. Modeling does not happen in a vacuum. More often than not, the underlying organizational system is secretly, or let's be real, not so secretly, rewarding that very behavior.
Let's compare Bandura's model with modern workplace performance metrics for a second. If you want to know why a leader is modeling aggressive, corner-cutting tactics, just look at what the system rewards. Does your company hand out massive bonuses for short-term sales at literally any cost? Do you tolerate toxic high performers simply because they hit their quarterly numbers? It's almost funny how corporate metrics will demand psychological safety in a fancy brochure, but practically prioritize ruthless efficiency on the floor. The leader is simply adopting the behaviors that secure praise and promotions within that specific environment.
And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of organizational culture. The leader isn't the sole architect of a bad culture. They're often just modeling the system's invisible hand. The organization, through its metrics and tolerances, unconsciously signals to everyone, hey, this is what works here.
But hey, before we get discouraged, Bandura's theory has a wonderfully hopeful side. The exact same observational mechanism that spreads harm can effortlessly spread positive, constructive habits. Children who watched calm, generous adults became calm and generous themselves. In the workplace, leaders who actively model active listening, empathy, and transparent communication will see those exact traits mirrored in their teams. It all depends on who is doing the modeling and what the system reinforces afterwards.
All right, Section 4. Redesigning the workplace system, our OD action plan. Bandura gave us the diagnosis. Now let's shift to our job and organizational development, which is building the how. How do we actually fix it?
To genuinely fix a workplace culture, you can't just try to coach an individual leader in isolation. It just doesn't work. You need a step-by-step systemic approach to build daily positive reinforcement habits. You have to change the environment they are operating in. So we're going to look at 4 key systemic interventions: implementing 360-degree feedback, redesigning performance metrics, creating peer-to-peer change champions, and rewarding constructive behavior.
Step 1 is absolutely critical. Implement 360-degree feedback. A leader cannot change their behavioral modeling until they realize who is watching them and exactly what is being replicated. My top tip here for using feedback to improve self-awareness is to teach leaders to view this data not as a personal attack, but as a mirror. If the team reports high anxiety and a fear of speaking up, the leader must look in that mirror and ask themselves, how am I physically modeling that anxiety in my daily interactions?
Moving to steps 2 and 3. Redesigning metrics and empowering change champions. This is how you create daily positive reinforcement habits. You absolutely must ensure that constructive behavior, like mentoring a junior employee or flagging a safety risk, is actually recognized and rewarded more heavily than toxic overperformance. Once you've got that, you empower peer-to-peer change champions. These are your informal influencers on the floor who are trained to actively model this new, healthier way of working so it spreads horizontally across the entire team.
And this perfectly captures the synthesis of everything we've talked about today. We need Bandura's power of observation to spark the change. People need to see their leaders and peers modeling the right way to act, which gets them to actually try the new behavior. But we absolutely need Skinner's concept of systemic reinforcement to make that new behavior stick permanently.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Take a moment today to reflect on who you are watching closely at work, and more importantly, who is watching you. Look at the systems around you. Are they accidentally rewarding the very behaviors you're trying to weed out of your team? And if they are, what are you going to redesign today? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and good luck casting a better shadow out there.